the Bread Kitchen. In this second video on bread making basics, I'm going to talk about wheat flour, specifically the different types of wheat flour that you can buy, and also the best ways of storing wheat flour. Now, before we start our discussion on flour, it's good to have a look at a grain of wheat. For this discussion, there are three important parts to the grain of wheat that we need to think about. The outer coating or shell of the wheat grain is called the bran and is made up of several layers. This protects the main part of the grain and is rich in B vitamins and minerals. This big mass in the middle is called the endosperm. Now it's from here that white flour is milled. Endosperm is rich in energy containing carbohydrates and important proteins. This small part at the bottom is the germ or embryo. It lies at one end of the grain and this part grows into a new plant if it is sown. It's rich in B vitamins, oil, vitamin E and natural plant fats. White flour is made by taking the grains of wheat, removing the bran and the germ and then grinding the remaining endosperm. Wholemeal flour is made by grinding the entire grain of wheat and therefore contains endosperm, bran and wheat germ. Now the endosperm contains a very important protein for bread making called gluten. It's gluten that gives the dough its elasticity and its strength and helps it to rise in the first place and then maintain its shape during baking. A typical white bread flour will have a gluten content of around 12%, but for wholemeal bread flours the gluten content needs to be somewhere between 13 and 14% because it needs that extra strength to suspend all the bits of bran and germ that are in there. So if you're uncertain whether flour is suitable for bread making or not, just look at the protein content on the side of the packet. Now it's worth stating the obvious that you should never try and use cake flour to try and make bread, or self-raising flour for that matter. Cake flour typically has a protein content of between 8 and 10%, and if you try and make bread using it, your bread will be very soft, it won't rise very well and it'll be pretty crumbly. Good for cakes, not good for bread. Let me show you how I store my flour. My basic white and wholemeal flour I keep in these large airtight plastic containers. Each one will hold about 3 kilos. I get through quite a lot of these flours, so 3 kilos will last me a couple of months. More specialist flours that I don't use quite so much of, I keep in these plastic containers, which are often used for keeping cereal in. While for cake and cookie baking, I keep my flour in these empty ice cream tubs. Flour should be kept in a nice cool place. I keep mine in the garage because it's usually colder there than anywhere else in the house. Now a word of warning about wholemeal flour. Because it contains the germ and the oils in the germ, it does have a tendency to go off after a while and become a bit rancid. So if you've got a packet of wholemeal flour at the back of the cupboard that you haven't used for 6 months or more, you might want to just sniff it and maybe throw it out. Now it's kind of true in general that old flour doesn't make particularly good bread. So my top tip for this video is if you're new to bread making and you're thinking of embarking on your first loaf, get yourself a fresh bag of flour. There's lots more information on my website about wheat flours and you might find it helpful to go and have a look at that. There's a discussion of things like chapati flours and spelt flours and their usefulness in baking bread. In the next video I'll be looking at mixing ingredients and kneading, a very important part of bread making. Thanks for watching and do join me next time in the Bread Kitchen.